Okay? Those that don't know, you don't know. So they come with their own emotional coat as well. So now I come in, I have this beautiful horse and I'm going to ride it, and I am just so happy to see you, buddy. Hi there. The upper lip is a prehensile organ. They use that to reach out and touch to see if things are safe. And I'm kind of jumping around a little bit because I just shook his hand. Okay? I didn't go right up and start petting my horse. If I do, I'm acting like a predator. If I want to be a partner with my horse, I'm polite and I ask permission to greet him. If I walked up and that horse did not touch me, I would wait. I'd wait for a minute because I want to form a relationship with my horse. I don't want to necessarily power over him, which we do sometimes because we're in a hurry and we got to do what we got to do. I get it. But now I go ahead and greet him. His upper lip is a prehensile organ. So again, I'm going to put thank you again. Nice. So now what I'm going to do is our automatic response is, you are so pretty, I'm going to pet you right here. Okay? I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. However, we go back to predator prey. If I'm a lion, I'm going to show you where I'm going to go after my deer. I'm going to go after the brain, the pole. I'm going to go after the underside, the heart, and the belly, and the stomach. So if you want to start communicating in the way the horse needs communicating to, we need to act and talk horse. So what do horses do to each other? They allo-groom. They groom along the top line. So if I want to start to build a relationship with my horse, I'm allo-grooming along the top line. Okay? And I'm not saying you can't brush and touch, and these guys they're desensitized to us. But think about how, and when you go back, I hope that you start to take a look at you and how you approach your horses. So, I come in with a purpose. We're allo-grooming. You shook my hand. Hi, buddy. So what I'm going to do is he's very tactile. That tells me a lot about him. One, he's either treated a lot, or two, he's very playful. His upper lip is sort of just going like this. He's kind of playing. He's probably a very playful horse. Play is a good thing. So, then we go along his line. We have the top line here. The blind spot of the horse is right along the midline and directly behind him. So when we cross behind him, we're watching the ear. This eye is his ear, and I are watching. He's now looking up that way. He turned and looked at me when I made a sound. As I cross behind him, watch me. Now he's got to tip his head and his ear to catch me. He didn't want to tip his head, but he tipped his ear. Did everybody see that? Okay. How many times do we go into the barn and we have our own mission? I got an hour, I got to get him ridden, I got to do this, and then I got to feed, and then I got to go home and, I got to cook dinner, and then I got to do this. When all of that happens, our emotional coats are getting zipped up. Okay? Now, when our emotional coats are zipped up, because it's combined of everything in our life, including trauma, mental health issues, physical issues, everything is part of that coat. Now it's zipped up and I'm going to the barn, and within seconds, the horse can read our energy. How many times have you guys gone into your barn when you're having a bad day, hoping that horse, and going to the barn gives you that magic and you feel better when you're around it. The smell of the manure and cleaning a stall makes you feel good. Just to walk in and that happens to be the day the horse is being a jerk. Right? You've been there. Why do you think that is? Yeah. It's because, interestingly enough, my emotional code is now affecting him. So, what I like to say is, I'm going to give this horse, for 1 hour that I'm going to work with him right now, I'm going to consciously unzip my emotional coat, take a deep breath and ground. All the still going to be there when I leave. So I'm going to go ahead and just hang it on the post. Because I owe it to him to try to come in with my emotional coat up. Just because you do that does not guarantee his coat is off. So there are some tools to help him remove his emotional coat. So one thing we do is I'm going to go ahead and try to approach him. This guy is pretty desensitized, but I'm going to walk up to him and see what he does. He could care less. Hi. Is there a volunteer here I can steal? Why don't you come up? So what I want you to do is I want you to actually first just walk in and walk to him, just sort of confidently walk up to him. If his head turns away, I want you to stop. It didn't. So what does that tell you about him? What's that? Is he? Say it one more time. He's open. Yeah. So his coat's unzipped. Okay? So now what I want you to do is I want you to back up a little bit. But that's what we wanted. Okay? Her emotional coat came in very open. She was open. She seemed confident. She raised her hand to come in front of all you people. Right? So she's got to be relatively confident to do that. If we're shy, we're not. Did they see my hand? It wasn't me. I didn't raise it. But she came in as a confident leader. The horse has his emotional coat off anyway. And now, as soon as she retreated, he's saying, where are you going? And I go. So let's have you walk around a little bit. Mike just sort of follow. See if he starts to follow her. We're just going to watch for a minute. Again, head is down. He's looking for the gate. So I'm going to have you do something here. So what I'm going to have you do, and this is not meant to scare the horse, it's just to be able to just let him kind of wag it around a little bit and walk around, see what he does. I want you guys to watch the body language. He's finally sawdust not to be all that great. So do you see how we could care less about her? What does that say again? What does that say about him? He's comfortable. He could care less. You know, he's pretty comfortable. He's tactile. He's kind of playing. Let's see if we can hit it on the ground a little harder. And, no, okay, he's moving. No, don't pull him. Let him do his thing. Okay. Okay, so now what we're going to do is stop and walk towards him, just holding your flag. Put it forward. Put it forward. Yep. Stop. Back up. What did he just tell her? No. What? Look where it was. She walked all around him, but as soon as she started to approach him with this, he's like, time out. His boundary, he just showed her his boundary. So I don't know this young lady, but how comfortable do you think she's going to be? Sorry, I don't know. Exactly, right? The horse, because they're flea animals, they have very wide boundaries. Now again, I'm going to say it over and over. We do the best we can with what we know. I wonder how many times our horse is telling us, no, stop, don't come closer, stop. And we're like, I got to do what I got to do. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to have you just continue to walk towards him. Okay? We're going to watch his head. His ear is watching. He's tactile. He's looking at the fence. He knows full well she's here. Now he's going to take a look. Again, binoculars on, coming down. He lowered his head, looking through the top part of his eye. He is touching this now to say to himself in his head, will this thing eat me? Oh no, I'm going to go ahead and play with it now. Okay? Now let's go ahead and let's bring it up to his pole. Let's see what happens. See, okay, right there. Does anybody see those really subtle cues? Did you see the, if we ignore that, we're not listening to what they say. Yes?
I had a nice feel of blood where the keys from the front.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's come around. Yep. We'll try it again. The cues were this. Not obvious. We're looking for obvious, you know? what we want to do is start to hone our eyes into the subtle cues. Okay? Touch, sniff, play. Give that to me. Give it. Now try to go up to the pole. Oh, heck no. Okay? So again, this is learning respecting their boundaries. Now I'm not saying that what's interesting is she walked around the ring with the flag to care less, right? Then she got to the point where she approached, she was a little hesitant, but allowed her in. As soon as she went to take that and touch him, he started to move. What do you think, or can you see any, no disrespect for the horse trainer or anything like that, but can you see any holes either in training, or can you see something interesting about the hand that holds the tool? I'll say it again. The hand that holds the tool. So if this horse is very playful and this whip was laying on the ground, he could be rolling all over it. It might be all over his neck and everything is great. Why all of a sudden is he doing this when it gets close to his pole? The hand that holds it. She's a predator. And now all of a sudden, even though she lifted it, I saw apprehension in her, okay? Reading her body language. What's he gonna do? And so that apprehension in her, the horse could be reading like, why is she apprehensive? I think I need to, oh, run, I gotta get out of here, okay? It's subtle. So let's lift it up again. What if you took it like this, put it in your hand, and just walk confidently up to his neck? Touch, and just set it up on his neck. Turned away. But was it the same kind of reaction? Flight, movement of the body, or I may not like it, but I can tolerate it? Do you see those small, subtle cues? We as predators miss them often. Okay? So we owe it to our horses to learn their language. It forms a strong relationship. I had a young girl that came to my home from France, and she was a foreign exchange student. And I'm lucky I could get English, to be honest with you. It was difficult communicating with someone that didn't speak my language. Other than, I know what this means. You know what I mean? But it's hard. So in order to form a relationship with her, I tried to learn some words. Or at least find the app for it. Okay? So this is what we're doing here. So when we talking now, he's yawning. Okay? So does his head look high and stressed out? No. He's just hanging out and doing great. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. So again, we're not able to allow him to move out of the space very much because he wants to be able to go out the door. The other thing too is when we talk about the feet, let me just try something, Mike. I'm going to lift up his foot. And she said he's not good for the farriers. Ew, I love you. He's here. So I'm going to kind of just get to know him a little bit because I'm asking a lot to take away his escape route. So I'm going to reach down and I'm going to ask him to pick up his foot. He's moving back. He's trying. Thank you. Now, do you see? Can you guys see where he's pulling it? I'm going to ask him slowly to set it down. He's doing really well. I'm going to ask him, it's okay, I'm patient with you. I'm going to work through it with you. He's still got full control of his foot. He's starting to allow me to lower it. Hold it away. He wants to trust, but he doesn't know me. It's okay. He's doing really, really well. Right there, so he's pulling back. And all I want to do is set his toe. Ooh, what are you telling me there? Yeah. You know what? I'm doing the best I can to try to trust you, but I don't know you, but I'm a pretty good boy, but oh heck no. At the end, I got a little whack. Because you know what? I want them to feel comfortable for the farriers. I have to tell you, we as parents, how many of you are parents? How would you feel if you take your child to the doctor, even though it's a scary place, you know they need to have treatment and help. If they have like a crazy maniac, we need to do our job as parents to work them through it. But I don't want a disrespectful child in there mouthing off to the doctor, nor do I want my horse mouthing off to the farrier. Okay? In order to do that, that farrier comes in, and it is not his job to train your horse. It's not his job. So it is about building trust. And part of that is taking the time it takes to build that relationship and let him know that it is safe to work on your feet. It has to be done. Okay? So we have to be able to teach our horses to lift their feet for their own health. But I also, when a horse responds at my place with a farrier or a vet, that's a little different, but with a farrier, I'm appalled with my horse. Because I have to sit back and my farrier knows me well enough to know, dude, go out and check your coat for a minute and then try coming back in. You know? Because if it's yours, he's reading it. If he's being disrespectful, we'll handle it. But I don't want him to do that. Yes? Okay. Yep. Oh no! Okay. Oh no! Okay, I gotta tell you what she just told me. The horse stopped giving her feet, and so she started giving a treat in between. That's a conditioned response, okay? It does work, you know, and these guys are not stupid. Just be careful because they'll start to manipulate. I am not opposed to treats. They're wonderful. I personally, and again, this is your own stuff, your own coats, I put it in their bucket. Because what happens is the more treats we get, the more mouthy they get, the more grabbing they get, the more searching they get. It's almost like if my kids go to Walmart and they want candy and they're screaming and yelling and throwing a temper tantrum and I give them candy just to be quiet, we now are almost training them. So be careful with that. You can start with that, but work into other conditions and responses. Horses are perfectly happy without a grooming. You know, treats are for me to feel better too. Okay? So that's part of some of our own emotional code. It's interesting, whenever I work with my clients, including veterans alike, they always want to bring treats for the horses. And I said, I should do a research project on this. Because what is it about people, even non-horse people, that have an overwhelming desire to give them a treat? Does anybody know? Yeah.
It's so they'll like them better.
Exactly. Because if I do that, they'll like me better. Okay? And you know what the horse does? Likes that treat. Okay? So again, what we're doing is we're putting a human emotion on a flea animal. And that's part of the reason why many of us own horses. They're very tolerant, they're beautiful, they're loving, and when even I go out to the barn and I'm having a bad day, many times it doesn't matter. There's magic in the therapy around being with horses. So even when they're being bad, it's different than a bad day, right? But I think one thing you've got to keep in mind, and this is very hard for horse people to understand, they are always horses first. When you watch them out in the field in a herd, which I highly recommend, you guys take the time to do that. Take an hour or two and study them. Watch how they interact with each other. And you hope to goodness they don't do that with you. Because they kick and they bite and they strike and they rear. And they do that because that's how they play. That's a horse for you. So what we as humans do is, you can check anywhere out in the facility, we we make sure they have the best bridles and saddles and blankets and treats and because that's a lot of stuff for us. And that's okay. I'm not opposed to that. But you want to keep it into perspective. Because if I turn this horse loose right now, you guys tell me, what booth do you think he's going to go to first? You're right. He's going to go where he smells the best, reward. But really, you think about, well, what about the horse? What about the saddle? What about the tack? If I turn him loose, which saddle company is he going to first? And maybe you guys have seen it. I have not, but I've never seen my horse come out of the barn, go to the tack room and tack up. If he does, tell me. That'd be a great study, right? So we gotta remember they're always horses first. Exactly, my point. That makes him happy. And you know what? This is what I see. Stop that. That you can't play with that. You can't play with that. That's gonna hurt you. That's gonna scare you. That plastic is gonna scare you. And I use this in another demonstration because I hear it a lot when I was training problem horses. I do not ride in the street because my horse is scared to death of cars. And it is, that's a scary thing to experience, riding down the road, right? And cars go by. But then I turn to them and say, the only thing that seems very unusual is your pasture's next to the road. And cars are going by like 55 miles an hour. So, is that horse actually afraid of those cars? Yeah. It's the hand hold that the rider that's riding. I get anxious because if he scoots from a car, I'm going in the ditch. So the interesting thing is when we take off our emotional coat and take a deep breath, and we know we're heading up that road, and we know that that horse is used to being around cars in the pasture, when we relax, they don't even see the cars. They don't even see the cars. That's why I don't do problem horse training anymore. A horse knows how to be a horse. You need to teach the owner how to relax, how to take a breath, how to ground before you ride, or do it on the ground. You need to build that relationship. And again, it's not your fault. It's the best we can with what we know. And it's cool because there's so much to learn. You guys have so many clinicians here that can really guide you. Don't get stuck on one. Learn from them all. That's what's so amazing about it. These guys deserve it. They've done a lot for us, from war to eating sawdust. It's pretty fascinating. Any questions so far? Okay, everybody. I'm going to walk up. He's going to play with Mike. He's going to play with his tags. Whatever. And again, yeah.
So my horse, I said it has to be horse.
Yeah.
He'll pick his feet up for me. He goes to pick up his feet, and he'll take every 700 pounds of himself and just put it on that horse.
Interesting. That's interesting. So I've always said this, that horses move to the ability of the rider. Horses do the same thing on foot. Okay? So, and again, not seeing the horse, my thought is she probably has more of a submissive nature. Okay? The horse senses it. He probably doesn't see her as confident of a leader as you. So in order to build that in her, one, she needs to start to look at her own emotional code, and one, be able to remove it. But also, just like him, oh, and some huge, what a hell, you know? Like he's so cute. He's playful. So the thing is that we need to get her to elevate her stimuli, her body presence, to say, I am going to be able to keep you safe, and this is how I'm going to do it. When Mike allowed that horse to nibble on the badge, that's Mike's choice. He also should make some boundaries. Okay? So I'm not saying that I think it's great that horses just kind of take advantage of people. What is his boundary? Are we on time? Here.
The point was with the horses. Can you hear me? When the horse was doing that, I held my ground. He backed off. I couldn't. Okay. But what I was doing is I knew he was being playful. If I back up, I just told him he won. And if he wins, then he's going to speak to my person. So by doing so, I put in that basically I was the competitor. I played even though like that.
What is allowed?
He moved his feet, I did.
Okay, what is allowed, and that's a personal boundary. You know, if you want that attention and that nibbling and everything, that's your prerogative, but keep in mind, that means you are lowering your own boundary. You're taking that step back. When horses move each other in the herd, the one that moves their feet first is lower on the totem pole. Yes. Yes. You are now becoming more of the alpha. Because first of all, I got a boundary around me. He allows that. I don't like it. I don't like that type of behavior with a horse towards me. So I have a certain amount of space around me that I want to move that horse away. Okay? So I don't like them nibbling and playing with me. I just don't, because I think it's a bad habit. Some people like that because that in their mind is a sense of affection. And it is a sense of affection for that person. For the horse, it can be a sense of curiosity. There's a difference. You know, so it all comes down to when we have our emotional coats on and we might need that attention and affection, we allow that. But keep in mind that when we don't want it and they do it, they can't tell the difference sometimes. So now all of a sudden the horse is reaching out to people that you didn't really want him to reach out to. But back at the barn when I was having a bad day, I allowed it. How does he know the difference? He doesn't. So I'm a firm believer of, I like to keep my boundaries consistent, but I'm not saying I don't hug them and I love them, and we all do. That's my code. But they could care less many times if we didn't do the job. You know what I mean? And I don't mean to upset anybody by saying that. I just feel like that's more of a herd dynamic. Okay? So this horse again is kind of walking around and kind of enjoying himself. Not so much anymore, but he's being very good. He's being very quiet. He's being very attentive. He was very tactile. Those are kind of things that I like to bring out in the horses because that tells me that when I work with him, I'm going to try to find tools that engage him in those behaviors that are fun. Any questions? We have 5 minutes. Yes. Yeah, so she's saying can you separate like in the stall versus in the ring versus, you know, in cross ties. I personally don't like to do a lot of training in their stalls. To me, that's their safe zone, okay? They like to go in there, those that are stalled, they go in there, they chill out, they have soak time. If you're training them, they spend time thinking about it. It's crazy, okay? I'm not a fan of training in stalls. That's the place, okay? So when it comes to cross ties, it kind of depends on what they're doing, okay? You know, if you've got a horse that's very tactile and nibbling stuff like that, I like to step back and think about, okay, is that actually giving him his own grounding? Because it's like children in school, the legs bouncing, and you used to get told don't do that, or they're tapping the pencil or whatever. That's a self-soothing. So, what is it? What is it? You know, and then you got to really think, what do you want to do with it? You know, if he's doing that and untying the cross ties and getting loose, and okay, well, maybe we need to fix that because we can't have it loose. You know, but really, I'm okay with horses self-soothing. And there's a difference between, can you guys tell me what you think the difference is between a horse that's self-soothing and a horse that has anxiety? What would it look like? In what way? Exactly. So body language. So, you know, we had a horse that's a weaver. We bought her. She had a lot of surgery. She's used to sticking to stuff. And she's this. And she's this. And she's like, you know, just kind of all over the place. That's anxiety. Okay? She had surgeries and had to stay in the stall for many weeks. And we had to give her some things that helped her self-soothe, like the balls that they play with and things to keep her mind occupied, because this was ruining her feet. Okay? So that's an anxiety. Some of them need medication. Does anybody here have anxiety? It is not cool. It's difficult, right? And the one thing I'm going to give you guys a little trick that was taught to me many years ago for a human way to self-soothe is when I feel the anxiety coming and I can recognize it. This is really weird, but take your tongue and count the back of your teeth. And I have a few missing, so I'm like 1, 5, 2. What's weird with that is it takes your mind away from the anxiety and into the here and now. That's a grounding tool. We use, I don't know if Mike has one, I use the horsetail zipper tabs that you know, they're a little piece of horsetail. Any of my clients that come into our program, and many of them are not horse people, they work with the horse and then the magic occurs because they're communicating and learning to remove their emotional code. They pick the color horsetail tab, I think I have one on my vest, that they would like to take home with them. And one thing that this does is an amazing grounding tool. Here's one on my vest. Okay? The brown horse. When I start to get anxious, I can start to pet this horsetail. Okay, as crazy as it sounds. But guess where my